How to Kill a Piano, episode 10. I'm George Tait. Thanks for coming back. This week's episode, It Must Be Monday, features chapter 8 of our story. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us for National Story Day as well. And also help us celebrate Positive Post Monday with the hashtag Positive Post Monday. This is where you go out in the world of social media, post something positive about the world or your life or something that is good that is happening right now, and post it. That's it. That's all you got to do. It was a lovely idea started by my good friend Rick Ma, and I try to continue it every Monday when I can. Without further ado, please enjoy the next part of How to Kill a Piano. Chapter 8. Invincible. I wasn't the first to be dropped on Charlie's doorstep, but I never met any of the others. Charlie didn't speak about them. I know very little about what they looked like, where they went, or where they are now. I don't even know how long it's been since they've been gone. Charlie was extremely sentimental, but he didn't keep photographs on display around the house. Instead, he kept artifacts, boxes of letters that came from friends all over the world, coloring pages that were always hand-dated and initialed on the back, and artwork that he had created and been gifted. Of course, Charlie kept notebooks, but those were Charlie's private place, and they weren't mine to delve into. One of my favorite artifacts in our home was a pile of stones that he called his memory rocks. This was a pile of stones he collected where each one represented a significant event in his life. When something special or traumatizing happened, Charlie would find a stone to represent that moment, pick it up, and take it home. Sometimes it would be a large, heavy stone that could hold open a door. Sometimes it was a beautiful beach rock, perfectly polished by the riverbed. And other times, it was as simple as a piece of gravel that had been kicked around in the dirt until Charlie gave it a new home. When I wanted a good story that opened up a new window into the mystery of Uncle Charlie's past, I would pick up one of those stones and ask, "What's this one?" Charlie would respond, first with a date, and then a story. "Tell me about the memory that belongs with this rock that looks like a foot." August 2nd, 1905. I picked that one up on the beaches of Miami when it was just a young city. I looked about your age at the time. I found it while walking on the beach. I filled my pockets with so many stones that day I nearly lost my shorts. That was the only stone that made it home with me. It was one of those perfect weather days. The sky was blue, the water was crystal clear, and the beach wasn't too crowded. "What about this one?" I asked while picking up a smooth white stone no larger than a golf ball. July 14th, 1972. That's a rock from Chisel Beach in England. There's no sand on the beach there. Instead, it's made up entirely of those beautiful white stones. Some are the size of my fist, and others no larger than our pocket change. No sand at all? Not for miles. When Charlie remembered something, he lived it over and over again, as if it was the first time. I remember that it was an unusually chilly day for mid-July. So I didn't do more than pop my feet in the water, letting my toes go for a dip. I had goosebumps all over my legs. The water itself was beautiful. It was a translucent blue-green. The advantage of a beautiful beach of stone like that is that you don't have to worry about getting wet sand in between your toes. "But Charlie, that's the best part." Charlie cringed. "I know you're a bit sadistic in your enjoyment of getting sand on your feet, but the nice thing about humans is that we all like and appreciate different things. There are only a handful of beaches like that in the world. I hope you get to see one of them one day." "What about this brick? Why is it mixed in with your memory rocks?" February 4th, 1929. That seemed like a lifetime ago. Well, 2 lifetimes, if I'm being honest. That brick comes from the old Garrick Theater downtown, where the great Harry Houdini held his very last performance. Were you there to see him perform? That day, I was there watching them tear the building down. You see that little granite pebble next to it? This one, I said, holding up a piece of gravel no larger than a dime. That's the one. That one is from October 24th, 1926. That was the day Houdini did his last show. He wasn't at his best that night, but he did get through the entire show, and the crowd loved him. When he stepped on stage, he made you feel like he was fighting for each and every one of us in the audience. His struggles to escape from chains, suspended upside down in a tank of water, was a poetic love note to the people who struggled to rise out of the slump of their own lives during the Great Depression. He invoked their imaginations and sparked a journey that allowed them to warm themselves against the sunlight. He was truly something. His last show ever? I asked. He was taken to the hospital the very next day for acute appendicitis and died a few days later in the hospital. Acute panda what? Feel that spot between your chest and your hip, George? That's where your abdomen is. I felt around trying to feel what Charlie was talking about. In there is your appendix. It's like a worm-like snaky tube shape. No one's exactly sure what it's supposed to do, but there's a theory that it stores away all the bacteria in your body. And when it's needed, it sort of reboots your immune system. Houdini's burst, and all that bacteria spilled out inside him into places it just wasn't supposed to be. If it's not caught fast enough, it's fatal. Why didn't they catch it fast enough? Houdini was a very stubborn man who simply refused to listen to his body and the advice of the experts. He didn't get the help he needed when his body tried to signal him that something was seriously very wrong. He gave in after his wife Bess begged him to see a doctor, and after the pain had become unbearable. He died? He died, Charlie repeated. Will you die someday? I certainly hope so. I certainly don't want to live forever. I've already lived long enough. We all come to an end one way or another. All we can do is live each moment as fully and richly as we can, to the best of our abilities. I'd like to think that that's what Houdini tried to do every day. I picked up one last rock, trying to delay Charlie's trip to the basement. It had ridges that I could click against my thumbnail as I ran it across the surface of the stone. It was about the size of a $50, but the shape of a crescent moon. Charlie started to answer before I could ask him about it. That's a seashell fossil. I don't remember where or when it came into my life, but that stone is the result of the decomposition of a sea animal that died inside its shell. It's over 10,000 years old, and one day I managed to find it before anyone else. You don't remember when or where? I thought these were meant to be memory stones. What's the point if you don't remember everyone's story? Not all memories were meant to be held on to. We hold them dear as long as we can, but eventually all memories fade. Some go before we think we're ready to let them go, and others fade when we do. Those rocks eventually just become rocks. And then I'm reminded not of the day I found them, but about today, when I get to discover each one in a new way and see them again for the very first time. In truth, George, that whole corner is full of nothing more than a pile of rocks. Nothing exists in them as physical objects, just as nothing exists in any of these objects in this room. But there's life and entire universes to be discovered in between the empty spaces. I love all of them. Some are old friends, some I've yet to meet, and others are there to remind me that not every memory has to feel pleasant to be useful. I cherished those moments when Uncle Charlie and I would explore the house. I'd ask him about his artifacts, and he'd share another story. Eventually, I did learn that there had been 3 girls and 2 other boys that Charlie cared for before me. They were all different ages, ranging from kids in single digits to teenagers, and then there was one in particular that Charlie never talked about. I always assumed she was a kid. But the more I learned through Charlie's stories, the more I discovered that maybe Charlie wasn't always alone, and that this person isn't someone he took care of, but someone he survived with for a while. One day, while Uncle Charlie was upstairs doing the dishes, I found an unusual box in the basement when he wasn't looking. When I found it, it was tucked away behind a few books near the top shelf, while I was searching for the universes in between empty spaces. I managed to climb all the way up to the very top of the bookshelf on the far wall. Looking down, I saw the piano in the center of the room, and it seemed from a distance to have sharp teeth that spilled out from beneath the fallboard. It was like I saw it in my nightmares, but this time I was wide awake. I pinched myself to be sure, and I slipped off the top shelf, knocking down the small box as the chair below cushioned my fall. Once I was level with the piano again, it seemed normal. The box plopped into my lap. I traced my fingers over the green and yellow swirled paint, feeling every curve of the galaxy that was swirled into the wood. It was a small box, no larger than a couple of soda cans. It had 2 hinged doors on the top. When I opened them, on one side was a collection of artifacts consisting of 2 small metal hearts that looked like they could be from the buttons on a coat. A small green pouch with an embroidered design of a Japanese boat floating on the river had a snap in the center that hid away a folded piece of paper. Inside, it had been kissed with pomegranate-colored lipstick. The note read, "Happy birthday," and was dated 8/10/11. On the other side of the box was a stack of hand-painted playing cards, except these cards didn't look like the normal ones you'd play a game with. Whoever painted them incorporated the pips of each of the natural designs into an image-rich painting. There were only 11 cards. The back designs were painted just like the outside of the box. The first was the Ace of Hearts, but a couple of added brushstrokes transformed the heart in the center of the card to look like a hot air balloon floating over a green meadow and across a blue sky with 2 fluffy clouds in the background. The Ace of Spades reminded me of Uncle Charlie's koala bear settled in the trees. The spade in the center became Eucalyptus's nose. The Ace of Diamonds was a kite flying high above the treetops, only tethered by a thin string, keeping it from launching itself away into the clouds to join the hot air balloon. The 2 of Clubs looked like Charlie's library. His table was sat front and center with the same lamplight that danced on the walls when we studied. The topmost club of the card's design blended into the stained glass lampshade, and the bottom club was swirled into the wood grain of the lamp base. The 5 of Hearts was one of my favorite designs. It was a portrait of a young woman. I'd like to imagine that it was the same woman who painted each of these cards. The 2 pips at the top became lamplights in the background, and the 2 pips at the bottom became lost in the purple and green dress that the woman was wearing that kissed the pavement beneath her feet. The center pip was the part of the dress that hugged the woman's torso. It was colored in with a deep purple. At first glance, you might think the woman in the painting looked sad, but I always thought she looked in love. All of the cards were very clever visual illusions that someone put a lot of time and care into. You could tell that these weren't simply pieces of art, but each one was a love letter to Uncle Charlie, complete with the 3 of Clubs represented by a cup of chamomile tea, and the 7 of Spades was the same woman that I found glowing under lamplight, but this time she had wings that stretched out to every corner of the card like a butterfly. Beneath the stack of cards, I found a note in Charlie's handwriting. It read, "I can only wish you the best of happiness wherever you ended up. When you gave me this box, it was a promise of a future that we were robbed of together, but you gave me memories I'll never forget. Thanks for choosing to spend a little of that journey with me. There's beauty in all memory, even the sad ones. Maybe we'll see each other again, or maybe you've given up. Like the promise of a twist tie wrapped around your finger, I'll never forget you. You'll always be in my heart, but I need to let you go for now. And it's time for me to pass on the love you taught me how to breathe in and help others see what you showed me. We can still save the world together, even if we're not doing it hand in hand or side by side." I quietly reassembled the contents of the box, closing the hinged doors at the top, restoring the galaxy, and climbed up to the top shelf and put the box back where it fell from. I'm not sure that even Charlie knew how old he really was. While we always celebrated my birthday, we never celebrated his. Adults are funny like that with kids. They always make a big deal out of our birthday, but always seem to dread their own. I do know that Charlie's been around long enough to learn to play a few 1,001 instruments perfectly, and yet he always claims that he simply lacks the talent. I always shrugged this off in disbelief and didn't dwell. I didn't really realize what Charlie was until I started growing up and everything started to come into sharp focus. My nightmares about the Hazelton brothers' piano stewing beneath us became darker and more frequent with each passing year. Each dream shook me awake as each ended up with either Uncle Charlie or myself laying motionless like a corpse inside the belly of the beast, held up only by the strings. I begged Uncle Charlie to stay away from the piano in the basement, but every morning I woke up to Charlie's perfect piano music, and every morning, as he fixed us breakfast, he reminded me that he couldn't play. He'd have no memory of the terrifying masterpieces that he was creating. I stopped suggesting that we take piano lessons together, and he stopped asking when I wanted to go. I only wanted our lives to go back to normal. I wanted Charlie back. Ever since that day we came back from the library and Charlie sat down at the piano outside the tea shop, he was exhausted all the time. One morning, I woke up early and snuck down the stairs with a tape recorder. I made sure to wake myself up before Charlie woke and wandered down the hall to the opening of the basement steps. I settled myself in, hidden behind a few of the cardboard boxes, and clicked the record button. I thought that if I could play back the music that I heard Charlie play, he'd hear the truth and that we would come up with a plan together, and he'd never have to touch the piano again. This went on for years, and on my 8th birthday, I started playing him back the tapes. When I played back the first tape, the sound that played back through the recorder was out of key. There was no consistent rhythm. It sounded nothing like what I heard while I was hiding beneath the piano. Charlie shrugged and said, "Sometimes even a few misplaced keystrokes can suggest a symphony. I'm glad you have an ear that hears beauty in my destruction. I'm old. I'm tired. Soon you'll have no use for me anymore anyway. Charlie, if you can't play, why do you come down here every morning and sit at the keys?" "Well, it doesn't sound like much. I feel like the piano plays me. I can't help but oblige." "That's what I've been trying to tell you, Charlie. You're not yourself. You've taught me that there's always a choice, even when there's only two and both are undesirable. There's always a better option between the two of them, and making a choice between one of those two is always better than making no choice at all." After Uncle Charlie was done listening to the first tape, he began playing both in the mornings to wake me up and playing again in the evenings before he slept. I made a point to scavenge through Charlie's files for the business card that passed into our home when the piano arrived, with the promise that if we ever wanted the piano banished back to where it came from, that Wormwood and Screwtape would trot along and move it out with no questions. I dialed the number on the card and did my best to change my voice to sound like Charlie's. The female voice on the other side of the line assured me that someone would come by in the morning and find the Hazelton a new home. I rested through Charlie's evening piano music peacefully that night. There were no nightmares. There was no waking up in a puddle of my own sweat, and I assured myself that everything would go back to normal soon. Mama Stork and her phalanx flew overhead as the sun slowly poked its head over the rooftops. 6 a.m. came all too early, alongside the ring of the doorbell. I stayed and slept through the call as Charlie answered the door to find Mr. Screwtape, front and center, grinning like a Cheshire cat who's about to catch a feast. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, Mr. Sulfate, but we received word that you were thinking of having the piano removed. Is this true? I urge you to reconsider, as if we take it away now..." "If we take it away now, It won't ever come back, and your home will feel oh so very empty without it. No longer will the walls dance in the shadows a dance of fire. You won't feel full when you play, and you'll feel that deep, sinking desire to take it back. But we can't. Once it's gone, it's gone. Uncle Charlie looked at Screwtape, this time without any skepticism, and simply said, "Oh, Mr. Screwtape, thanks for stopping by. No, you must be confused. I didn't call. I love the piano. I play it almost every day. There must be some confusion. It's fine. Thanks very much for stopping by. I'll see you on your way." I woke up to the sound of Charlie in the kitchen cooking breakfast. There was no music that morning. I was thrilled. Once we finished eating breakfast together, Charlie and I went down to play our first game of chess for the day. I froze as I made my last step down the stairs. I saw it still standing there in the center of the room. It was so proud of itself. It stood taller. The hood of the beast was open as if it was flaunting its tail feathers in front of me. Anytime I tried to get close to the instrument to sit down to attempt my hand at playing at it, I'd suddenly find myself back upstairs in my bedroom. The door always shut tightly behind me. Wormwood and Screwtape monitored their dashboard screens from safely inside their truck for years. Every time my fingers would brush the ivory keys, Screwtape would tuck his hair behind one ear, and I'd find myself back upstairs, not completely sure how I arrived there. I thought I was starting to lose my mind. I could see everything that was happening, and yet no one else seemed to help me make sense of any of it. I began to watch people all over town sit at the keys of the neighborhood pianos like zombies watching their fingers travel back and forth, playing sophisticated symphonies of sin. Zombies are just people trapped in their own bodies, watching themselves uncontrollably taken over by bad decisions of survival. Don't believe me? Have you ever tried to endure chopsticks for more than 30 seconds? I don't mean when it's played by a concert pianist playing it professionally. I mean when the average Joe plays it. Okay, let's be honest. Even when it's played well, it sounds like somebody taking a knife into the fleshy corpse of one's own demise and going da 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 da. Sometimes I think chopsticks would have been a fitting alternative to the music they used in the shower scene in Hitchcock's Psycho. But you don't mess with a masterpiece. That's why dismantling this piano was going to be so difficult. Even evil can produce artistic masterpieces. The day after my 16th birthday, Charlie had gone into town alone. I went out to the garage where Charlie kept the splitting axe that he always used when splitting logs for the fireplace and grabbed it and brought it back into the house. A splitting axe isn't meant to cut wood, but rather split the fibers of the wood apart, shredding them into pieces. I thought this might be a fitting demise, and that I had struck on a sharp idea. That is, if I was fast enough to swing the axe before Wormwood could tuck the hair behind his ear. I carried the axe down stealthily behind my back, wove my way to the center of the basement labyrinth, snuck up behind it, and took my first swing. The piano seemed to crawl out of the way in slow motion as I watched the axe swing slowly over my head in a way I couldn't fast forward. The blade crashed into the floor with a loud thud, cracking the basement tile. I tried again, attempting to swing the axe a little harder and faster the second time. The piano danced sideways, avoiding my swing. Meanwhile, outside in the moving truck, Screwtape and Wormwood were on their lunch break and feeding the intervals their afternoon snack of doorknobs. Screwtape and Wormwood weren't allowed food. They were demons after all. So they found particular joy in this daily afternoon feeding ritual. Back inside, I was taking my third swing, lifting the axe high over my head, and I came down as hard and fast as I could over the side of the piano. I'm not exactly sure what happened. But I remember I woke up inside the bed of the piano with the lid pinning me in place. The axe was nowhere to be found, and I'm not sure how long I had been there unconscious. Wormwood laughed maniacally as one of the intervals got one of the doorknobs stuck in its throat. Another swan dived towards it, not wanting to help but worried it wouldn't get any to eat for itself. Screwtape's attention was pulled towards Charlie's Topaz, pulling back down the street and into the driveway. Suddenly, he saw the images of me inside the piano on the monitor and tucked his hair behind his ear. I found myself back in bed, with tears running down my face when Charlie walked in the door. Today's episode featured music by Beethoven and his Piano Sonata No. 8, Opus 13, The Joyous Farmer by Robert Schumann, Reverie in F Major by Claude Debussy, and improvisations by yours truly on my Yamaha electric piano. Thanks for joining us. I'm George Tait. I'll see you at How to Kill a Piano next week.